the SRO. First one is that. Second one is the tennis court, which we did not get to, but we wanted to keep it, we talked about it, but it has a separate, oh, I'm gonna pass these out. And then the next thing is the agreement, so you just know what you're getting.
Oh, I forgot to read the tennis courts. We're getting order.
Yes.
Okay, with that, I'd like to go ahead and call the Joint City Cloverdale Unified School District Subcommittee meeting to order. It's exactly 4:33. So let the records show that Vice Chair Lance, our mayor, is here. City Manager David Kelly, our Assistant City Manager, CDD, Kevin Thompson, Board President Ashley Holmes White, School Board Member Preston Addison is not present at this time, and our School Superintendent Helen is present. We also have our Police Chief Jason Ferguson, and Deborah Howe, the CEO of Alexander Bell. So with that, we'll open up the public comments. Members of the public may comment on any item not on the agenda. Attendees will be muted until they are called upon for public comment. To make a public comment, use the raise hand icon on your smart device or desktop computer or dial *9. If you are using just your telephone, please listen carefully for the chair, the city clerk, to address you by name or phone number. And for the audible news notification that you have, then unmute. Once you begin your public comment, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And please let the record show Trustee Preston Addison is present. Any hands?
No one's raising their hand at this time.
Okay, so no public comments. We'll move on to communications. We don't have any. Okay. We'll move on to the minutes. Approval. If we get an opportunity to review them. Any changes? It's moved to approve by Lance, Vice Chair, and I'll second that. Any discussion on that? Seeing none. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Okay, we'll move to item 5A, which is current items for discussion. Update on cooperative agreement reviewed by city school ad hoc, and I'm going to consolidate with update on the MOU for the school since those are tied together and we did discuss those. And I'm going to open it up to our superintendent. But before that, we did meet Friday. We spent about an hour and a half going through all this. So that's
Well, Preston, there are 3 different documents we everyone is aware we previously had a document that was, I don't know if it was the way that was scanned or the way it was created, but we're all looking at it as a series of documents together. And so we went back to the original agreement. As Joe mentioned, Ashley, who's the clerk, not yet the board president, so we should correct that in the agenda. Ashley, Joe, and I met to go over the agreement with a slightly different lens. Ashley and I went through it previously, and I think we agreed. We were looking at what was obsolete, what needed to be removed, what no longer applied. But when the 3 of us came together, really looked at it in terms of what do we want as an ongoing agreement. And so you can see that there are some notes. The cities or Joe's suggestions are in red. The district's notes are in blue. We did not try to, complete this as much as we wanted to call out a few things for discussion. At the back of this agreement, you'll notice that there's a section that I've grayed out because it is the description of the resource officer program, and we have a separate agreement for that. So that would come out of, we can reference the agreement, but it will come out of the city school subcommittee agreement and be its own MOU. And then in addition, we do want to move forward with some collaborative agreement around tennis courts specifically. However, I think we also have this Parks and Rec and a kind of a philosophical piece that we wanted to include in the agreement, you know, the spirit of which we feel is really about creating more opportunities for the community to engage in healthy activities, be outdoors together, you know, fitness, et cetera, and that we would see our facilities as a community resource collectively and try to find ways to enhance access and improve what we can offer. So the tennis courts are unique because of the former agreement that was predicated on I think a grant that the city received that helped to restore the tennis courts.
It's actually the Cloverdale Tennis Association.
Okay, so they got the grant.
But the city used general fund or
Okay.
set aside money. Our contribution was out of the city.
So there was kind of a matching or a collaborative effort to restore the tennis courts. And we can imagine that that's probably something that will have to happen again, that tennis courts have to be resurfaced, that there are repairs that need to be made. And there's some discussion also of painting 2 of them as pickleball courts to add to pickleball court access and maybe introduce that as part of our curriculum. So we have yet to talk to our tennis coach or anyone in the athletics program at the high school, but in our meeting on Friday, we all felt like that might be a solution. So, and if anyone has seen the gym at Washington, you know that you can paint a lot of lines on a court and it doesn't interfere with play. So I myself have never played pickleball, but I'm becoming more and more interested in learning. So with that, I think the document we want to start with is the collaborative agreement. That is the tennis courts. I'm sorry, you guys, because they all look somewhat similar. You have to look at them more closely. This is the tennis courts. It says discussion still needed. It is the one that says revised 2022 is the MOU for the police officer. It is the one that's restated cooperative agreement. So should we just give people some time?
So what I wanted to just suggest, because we really just touched on it on Friday, I'd like to just maybe leave this with for today. Everybody can take it back, look at it. I can meet with our staff, you can meet with your staff regarding the tennis courts and how that would work. Then we come back together and we'll just fine tune this and put together our first draft of what we feel the language should look like. Then we can get it out and have it on our agenda. And if this is something where we want to move a little faster, we could maybe have a special meeting sooner just for this one item. And it wouldn't be a long meeting because everybody would have an opportunity to review it first. So, because otherwise I think if we go line by line, we're going to be.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I think it would be better really. There's a lot of, I really appreciate all your work on this.
Thanks.
Because you put it into the SRO position, a lot of thoughts, which I thought was really well done. And we got a lot of this finalized. And I think we kind of got a better understanding of how we'd like to put it together. So does that sound like a plan?
Todd loves it when I go line by line to policy.
Especially during a public meeting.
That's what I meant.
So after midnight.
Fair to say, if we maybe schedule a follow-up meeting, say in 2 weeks or so, and or whenever the calendar, but give everybody here 2 weeks to review, think about it, and submit comments either to Beth or myself.
Mhm.
And then we can kind of bring those together when we meet. We can polish it off and come up with some language that we think we can support, get it to you for review, and then we can discuss it at our next meeting.
I do want to make, if I may, a point about under new development projects that the district's attorneys and the city's attorneys are working on kind of a procedural agreement that does not need to be restated here. It just can be referenced. So there's some language in general. I would say we don't have conflicting language in it's more about just the wordsmithing and that each party added to the agreement. So not a lot of conflict in this particular document, the collaborative agreement. The one area that we didn't really get into in depth was the crossing guard. We didn't really talk about how to work on that program. So that may require some discussion.
The SRO, I just wanted to bring, if you could just elaborate a little bit that before we go, so the city's got a little better understanding. We talked a little bit about 3-year versus 5-year commitment. I would for 5, knowing that there is, because the city may also run into financial difficulties within the next 5 years. It's hard to project finances, as we all know. There is a clause in the agreement that does allow either or to withdraw. But the intent, as I explained, is not really to go into the short term, but it's a long-term commitment. And so 5 years is what we were asking for. And you, I just want to take it from there, and let you just weigh in so the chief and
Sure.
the manager could hear that.
Well, the biggest issue is that school funding, we tend to plan in 3-year cycles. We need to be able to project 3 years out in order for our budget to be approved and for us to remain outside of what is called qualified status. So we don't, it's very hard because the funding is so volatile. I'm sure it's true for the city as well, for us to make a 5-year commitment. And there's also tremendous turnover in schools. So the people who make an agreement may not be there in 5 years or 3 years. So we try to scale the agreement to match our budgeting process. Right now, it's a very, I would say, and especially in all my years in education, and especially volatile time where we're getting lots of one-time money, but we can't predict ongoing costs. And making commitments to personnel, we're bargaining with our own labor unions. So I feel comfortable with us because we plan in 3 years, budgeting for 3 years. We can put a clause in that says that, since we do that every year, we project out 3 years. There can certainly be a clause in there that discusses the renewal on the sort of evergreening of the agreement, so that the parties can project forward and know we have 2 more years of funding, and after that we may not. If that's helpful. 5 years it would be hard for, I think, it would be hard for me to sell that, knowing that we don't really know where we'll be. And of course, yeah, we can back out, we can lay off staff, et cetera, but it feels a little disingenuous to say, yes, let's agree to 5 years when we really don't know in 5 years what our financial status will be.
So I just wanted the city to hear that piece, and I think the commitment, maybe if we can out with some wording that kind of said our intent is to continue this long term, but again, recognizing funding limitations.
Could we write it like one of the other ones I read through? Could we say a 3-year agreement that renews for 1 year and then 1 year? So that it is a 5-year, but based on funding for that 4th year, we'll have an automatic renewal, and for the 5th year with a funding check at that 3 years out.
That's a great idea. We could put language in there, you'll get that, you could review it. And, I think the intent, we all know.
I just want it to last as long as we've talked about it.
Well, the other idea, and I know I'm kind of probably kicking the city at this point, and we discussed it last month, when I brought that. Basically, you had said there was funding for 50,000 a year for 3 years.
I said, okay.
As a nothing said. I was like, hey, if we were looking
That was
at
a
it,
private
it'd be about-
conversation.
Well, it's written in the paperwork. So what I was, it wasn't set in stone. It was up to, because no numbers were set. And so what I was wondering is, what if it was a 30,000 versus 50 for the longer term? So it comes up the same amount.
Because of our one-time funding that we can use toward the cost of an SRO, I don't think that's a consequence for us. I think it's the years out where that funding is no longer, as far as we know, no longer available, where it's hard for us to predict. So Patty and I haven't even had a chance to really crunch these numbers, but based on what we know is that we were given a lot of money. Staffing is incredibly challenging. So quite a lot of money that we expected to spend on staffing, including supervision, which is tied to safety, wasn't spent. So that's one of the reasons that I feel confident about saying we can do this while we have this one-time money, we can make that contribution. I think what you'll notice in our language and some of the questions that we ask has to do with, you know, the investment and the return on that, or the school district's control, for lack of a better word, over the time of the SRO, which is something that's really hard for you to predict. But where if we're making what, let's just say it's 50, it's a third of the cost, somewhere between a third and a quarter of the cost. Let's just say 30%. I don't know. I'm guessing based on teacher salaries, how all the driven costs, you know, add quite a significant amount. So if it's a third of the cost, let's say, that we have some control over that third of the time. I think the school district, and I was not here when we had an SRO, but there was a period of time, and everybody's heard about it, where the police department was understaffed and the SRO was pulled off campus quite a bit, and where the school district felt like the benefit wasn't as great when that happened. So I think I wasn't here, Chief Ferguson, you were here, but I think there's a little residual concern. What if we do this and then we never have the person on campus?
So if I may add a few comments there, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I think the former SRO position was based on a part-time basis, and that person was pulled out periodically. What we'd be looking at with the current MOU and conditions set forth would be a full-time SRO at the schools, which means you'll have them there the entire school day for the duration. And I think some of the language and some of the notes you've made in here, I'm already seeing that why you have concerns, that those wouldn't be concerns with a full-time officer. They would be there and they would not be pulled out if there was somebody that was off on vacation and we were struggling to get them in. I think where we would have any concern in the long term would be if we lost 2 or 3 officers and then we had to pull that person out for an extended period of time. I think some of those discussions could come later as to how we handle that, or perhaps figure it out in the 2 weeks that we're talking about this. But under some of the language you see here, and I've seen your comments, that would be the concern. We wouldn't pull them out of that circumstance that you've listed in here.
And I just want to add one quick comment. The concern that you raised is a concern that we heard after the program was vacant. And I told Jeremy this never came to our committee. This was never brought to the city's attention. So that I know would not be the case, like you and I talked about. It's critical, this committee, subcommittee especially, that don't wait for the subcommittee. You start by making a phone call to the chief, but bring it up here so we could all weigh in and figure out what's going on. But I was unaware that it was pulled, and I don't know if it was pulled by the department or the SRO just felt it was quiet and wanted to take a ride downtown. Check it. No, I don't mean that. You just don't know what was going on. And so it makes it really hard to address that problem. I think the assurance is that problem will reoccur without us all being in the loop. So,
And you saw probably this language around evaluation.
Yeah.
So I know, we know that there are probably very specific methods for evaluating. But I think that question of having a feedback loop of some kind where, you know, I may be evaluating, let's say I'm evaluating an employee that the principal who works with them gives me feedback that I then embed in the evaluation. So I think I don't know if we formalize that, but I think that ongoing communication, the feedback loop, where we do feel like, hey, if we're helping to pay for this position, we have a voice and an opportunity to get feedback on the performance.
And you would, and that's how we would operate under
Okay.
this. I would expect if there's a problem, an immediate call me to,
Okay.
communications can be key. We address it right off the bat. But to answer your question, how the evaluation process works, it works very similar to us in the law enforcement arena. I may not supervise somebody, that person, their supervisor is going to reach out to me and say, hey, what can I be putting in the CVAL? The same concept would happen to use. Okay, how did they work out? Is there improvements needed? What can be done? And that's exactly how this format would work. But open lines of communication would be key in this. If there is an issue, we would want to address the
Chair, I just wanted to give and provide the subcommittee with an overview of what we're bringing forward in our next council meeting on the 25th. So we're bringing forward a draft budget. This is the first time we're doing a 2-year budget. So we're bringing forward a budget for the next 2 fiscal years. One of the items that we are putting on the agenda that's prior to the budget is discussion on adding a 10th officer. So right now we have 9 sworn officers, 2 sergeants, a lieutenant, and the chief. So we've got 13. So we want to add a 14th sworn member or personnel or 10th patrol officer. What we view this is an opportunity to facilitate our ability to provide the SRO services as the chiefs outlined in the MOU. And I think that's real critical to being able to dedicate those hours as is provided here. It's really, a full-time position. And so on Wednesday of next week, we're bringing forward a discussion item requesting council to authorize the chief to begin recruitment for that 10th officer, place the funding for that position within the budget. What we are doing, because I think it's critical, is to identify that the school district's willing to help fund an SRO position that would offset some of the cost of adding the 10th officer. What we're trying to do is, because we don't think that the 10th officer is going to be the SRO. This is there's specialized training and everything, and there's going to be a lot of work. Right, more than likely be, the chief in consultation with the superintendent will choose the SRO. But I just wanted to kind of outline that that's how we're planning on bringing this forward to council, is to authorization to add that 10th officer, which would then provide the ability from a staffing perspective to dedicate an officer to a school resource officer. So I want to just kind of separate the two. It's the 10th officer isn't the SRO, but the 10th officer allows for the police department to be able to provide the SRO services as outlined in the MOU. So I think that was critical. And of course, we are identifying that kind of the tenets of the discussion about funding the SRO position and how that will help offset the cost to the city of adding a position, dedicating the officer to be an SRO. So that's kind of the approach. It's a little bit nuanced. So, I know Mayor Lance and Chair Paula understand it very well. I hope that the remaining council kind of understands how we're bringing this forward. But the SRO piece of that will be part of this conversation when we bring it forward to the council next week, because we're showing that as a critical. It's one of the things we'd be able to provide by adding this additional officer, amongst other things. It does provide.
And I think that's a critical element, because there are benefits that need to be articulated.
Right, exactly.
And I think it's important that we point out the district's commitment to at least 3 years. Of course, subject to board approval, but with the understanding that there'll be automatic renewals based on we're all in the same boat.
Right.
Based on funding, and year to year, but the goal is to fund it. So.
And just a thought on the fiscal end, since we do have more one-time funds now, maybe we can make a larger commitment in the early years. So if we were saying, I'm just pulling these numbers out of nowhere, if we were saying we were going to commit 40,000 a year, maybe at the early years, we have a structure where year 1, year 2, maybe year 3, depending on projections, we can commit 50,000 and then guarantee towards the end 30,000, because we know we have more money now. So increase our commitment. And we've seen this with other agreements with the city, where the city came in at $56,000 for the tennis courts, the school district had a much, much lower commitment. But then ours was ongoing and we did the out years. And I think the same sort of structure might work here because we have these one-time funds where this is where we can put in a bigger lump at the beginning with then a smaller ongoing. I don't know.
Well, and my thought process last time was about basically if you pinned it to something that's, often, then if they can be actually spent, saved, right?
No, these dollars have to be expended.
I thought if it's already put into a budget item.
No, like encumbrance, these dollars don't work like that, they have to be gone. So, but to your point, Preston, the idea that it'd be this sort of staggered, we have to actually
Right.
crunch the numbers, but that isn't a bad idea.
And that we could also look at our funds for this room today, where there's a thing where the president signed the thing allowing more of the recovery funds to be used for public safety. So that's something. I'll take that out.
Okay.
It's very interesting to read. Not that that's always a large piece of it, because you got a lot of projects, but it's an important piece.
Can I ask a procedural question? Do you need our board to approve the MOU before you can go to the council with the budget item?
Well, I think that would of course be ideal, but we're bringing forward the draft budget for kind of final input from council with the plan to bring it back on June 8th for adoption. So we're getting very close to adopting the budget, and I'm not sure we'll have this completely wrapped up. So I think it's going to be, we want to make sure that we've got a placeholder in the budget so that we're ready to go. But a lot of it will be contingent, I think, on final ratification or approval of an MOU for the SRO. So, Chief and I talked, we're making clear to council that on Wednesday next week, the MOU is going to need to come back for council's approval. At this point, we're just seeking a placeholder, but part of the whole conversation around that, the TIF officer pertains to the SRO. So it might be something you want to tune into.
Yes, okay.
So, would May 26th be a good date to get all your comments back to Rebecca and myself and ideas? I mean, any of these ideas would be good. I mean, we captured some of them, but as you think of new things, then maybe sometime right after that day, we can call a meeting that works for us to finalize our thoughts. Give that some thought and get this thing ironed out.
Do you have these open here now?
Yes, I can send them to all of you. I think I intended to do that today, and I'm substituting for the principal, so
Yeah.
it didn't happen, but I'll get them to you all.
Maybe I can have a password to get the thing to open.
I opened them up for viewing to the public because I knew that, that would be complicating, but I can make them. I don't know how comfortable everybody is with Google Docs, but what I like is that you can make comments that everybody can see, and I find them easier to read than track changes. So I'm happy to open them to everyone in the team, and people can make comments or propose edits. The alternative is I can send them to you as Word documents, but then we have to consolidate everything in another, that just gets crazy. So
Whatever works.
Okay. if you, great.
Would you mind to schedule another meeting? Check your calendar with Ashley and myself.
I think if we're talking about the MOU, can we also include Chief Ferguson? Just that a lot of these questions you can probably answer in the meeting. And we can hammer that out. Yeah. But you used, I'm sorry, Chair Paul, you said the 26th to get the documents back.
For comments from the team, if you guys just read it and give us your thoughts on good, bad, or different on different sections, we can absorb that and kind of finalize some language that we think meets everybody's. And if we disagree with something, we'll be able to talk about that. That sounds like a decent plan. Okay, great. So anything else on this? Yeah, I'd like to, I see our city attorney up there, and I know he's going to talk a little bit about item number, the city school attorney's update on mitigating development impacts on the school district. So I'd like to put the group's permission move to 5G and let our Alex go forward. Alex?
Yeah, good afternoon. I guess it still is, committee members. I just wanted to provide a brief update following, direction from the committee a few months ago. We've met with the school district's attorneys a couple times, and then also exchanged some emails about what authority the city has to impose mitigation measures on residential development projects. And I've prepared a short memorandum, but the school district's attorneys are still reviewing that. And so, as soon as they're done and have signed off on that, we'll forward that to the committee. But the overall takeaway is sort of there's two types of housing projects. One type of housing project is a project that complies with all of the city's existing standards, and perhaps only needs a sort of site development review or design review. And then other types of projects that need greater entitlements, need perhaps a zoning change. And so for the first type of project where project complies with all of the city's objective zoning standards, recent state housing laws make it really tie the city's hands, provided the city can't deny a project, can't impose any conditions that make the project infeasible, either physically or financially, or and similarly, don't allow the city to impose any fees other than the school facilities impact fee to mitigate the impact of the project on school facilities. There can be other mitigation measures imposed, but they have to be proportionate to the impact of the project. So they can't be, a new project can't be required to mitigate more than its fair share to, correct existing deficiencies or anything like that. Working with the school district's council, we tried to find whether there's any requirement for a will serve letter to be issued by the school district, and we were unable to find anything, either our office or the school district's council requiring will serve letters to be provided before a city can approve a residential project. There is a requirement for developers to show that they've asked which schools will serve a development, but not that the school district provides any sort of will serve letter or approval. So that's all for projects that meet all of the city's objective standards. When you get a new project that doesn't meet the city's existing standards, let's say it needs a zoning change, for example, it wants to go build something out in an area that's, agricultural now and wants to do a new development out there or something like that. That's where a city still has a lot of authority to first deny the project. And because they have the authority to deny the project, the city, could find that without additional mitigation measures, it doesn't want to approve those sort of additional entitlements or those exceptions or new rules for that project. So in those situations, the city, continues to have additional authority to require those sorts of changes. And so that is sort of those sorts of additional mitigation measures. So that's just a very quick high level overview. Like I mentioned, prepared a short memorandum summarizing all of that and shared it with the school district's council to make sure it reflected all of their thoughts and opinions too last week, and they are still reviewing that, and as soon as that gets their sign off, I will, of course, forward it to all the members of the committee.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you're saying that if the development meets all the city standards, they are not required to provide a will serve letter from the school district, that we will be able to serve the students of that development, correct?
Correct. And you know, with talking with, excuse me, you know, the district's council, we sought to find if there, is there a requirement, if there's anything in state law, and all either side could find is a requirement that when a new subdivision is proposed, that they ask what serves, either ask what schools will serve the district, or simply show that they have asked which schools will serve the district, and we're
But
unable.
if I'm understanding what you're saying, then if it doesn't meet the city standards, then the city can require or does require a will serve letter. So can't that be one of the standards the city sets?
Well, it needs to be a zoning standard. That's not a zoning standard. A zoning standard would be, the zoning of the parcel, the density, setback, lot coverage, those sorts of things.
So that's something that we would need to consult with our attorneys about, because there may be, that doesn't seem sustainable at all for a community and a district of our size. Yeah.
Well, it just tells me that this conversation needs to take place with our state elected
Yeah.
to make some changes, because the reality is the law is not helping in these situations.
The city can't sustain their infrastructure, right?
Yeah. So as we get this may be something we want to talk about and get our senator and our assemblyman into the loop and have that conversation, because the system's sort of broken and we're trying to piece it together.
And I would just add that certainly Cloverdale and Cloverdale Unified are not the only jurisdictions, that feel this pinch. There are similar, we work with other cities, some big, sort of what you would think of as big, wealthy, fast growing areas like Dublin, for example, down in, Alameda County, that face the same pressures, and I think would sort of be happy to join sort of an effort to talk to the legislature. I think there's probably a lot of cities and districts around the state that feel similarly.
So Alex, thank you so much. Any other questions for him? We let him go on to work. So thank you. We look forward to getting that memo. So
Thanks. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
thank you. You too. Okay. So we'll move on to item 5C, which is an update on the storm drain project for Hillsbury Abbey at Citrus Fair. I asked for this to be put on so we can get an update.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair, and I want to acknowledge Debbie Howe here on behalf of the Alexander Valley Wellness, who the city has executed a development agreement with. Well, the council has approved an ordinance approving the development agreement. We do have to put our final signatures to that, Debbie. But one of the critical infrastructure projects that we've talked about to support both development of Times Square, but also to address drainage at the Washington School is an overall drainage project, and that project does include a set of drainage improvements that are necessary along both Citrus Fair Drive as well as Hillsburg Avenue. So there's a set of conceptual drawings that both the city's engineer as well as the healthcare district's engineer have prepared that reflect the drainage improvements, including connecting to the school's drainage system. The council did support allocating American Rescue Plan funds towards the project. The the proposed mechanism for funding those improvements was through the development agreement. The way in which it was approached was that as part of the on-site improvements that would be constructed by the construction team for Alexander Valley Healthcare would construct the drainage improvements, and the city would, in essence, reimburse the district for the healthcare district for those costs incurred for those improvements. So part of the way it's envisioned would be that when the site improvements are underway, that the drainage improvements would be constructed as part of the grading and improvements on Times Square. So it's kind of, in a way right now, it's contingent upon the planned construction of the healthcare site or grading of the site to initiate those drainage improvements. So that's currently how it's proposed for in the development agreement, Chair. But I think, you know, there was some interest in maybe a conversation around timing and how that may occur. So the other kind of method that a city would traditionally bring a project like that forward would be to complete our own design, prepare bid specifications, release the bids. You know, usually it's the lowest responsible bidder, just like the school district does through its procurement process, and then manage the construction contract. One of the reasons why we kind of went this way was because it seems like it's a little more efficient. You're doing site mobilization once, and all the improvements are kind of going in at the same time versus kind of a piecemeal approach. So that's kind of why that's why it was approached that way. And it's much easier for the city to write a check than it is go through that whole procurement process and bid process. So that's kind of where we're at, Chair, on that. I know Debbie, I shot you an email just saying this was going to be an update. So I know part of it's contingent on, you know, where you are with the project and what your vision is for how we might implement the development agreement and carry out those drainage improvements.
So I apologize for not getting back to you on your email. I actually have 3 new staff members right now that are onboarding and training and, you know, staffing and it's
It's a lot, but congratulations, you have staff.
and we hired a doctor too, but I don't have to train him, thank God. So yeah, it's a little busy right now with the staffing issues, but I can update you on this. All right. So I talked to the escrow company, what is today? Monday, on Thursday, last week. And the Belgian race Alta survey was done, and there was discrepancies with the preliminary title report, of course, right? If I learned anything in this process, everything takes longer than, you know, I don't know. It's crazy. So anyway, they were trying to work that out. They were having a conversation. They're supposed to amend the title report, and then the title officer got COVID. So he was down for a week, supposed to be back today. I mean, this is my life. I mean, I don't know what to say. It just is. So I talked to this escrow. I didn't know I had a title officer and escrow officer, but we have a title officer and escrow officer. So then I talked to the escrow officer and said, what, is there anything else missing? So it's the fact that you just signed, so we have to sign the development agreement that has to be recorded with the deed when we buy property, you know, give them the money. We need to get that signed, get that in. Because if everything's in, she was gonna go through the list and then get back to me. She's estimating 2 weeks, 3 weeks close, okay, close the escrow. God, please. Because in the meantime, I'm writing up my federal report on my ARPA funding for the facility. I'm in the second half of the grant, and there is a timeline that I have to meet. So we're working with our contractor and our architect. We've gotten all updated bids and all that stuff, and now we're working on the timeline. That's what I can tell you. What happens in dirt work, I have no idea, nor do I want to know. But I think we're on it, and we could probably have a better, I could probably have a timeline for you next month at your next meeting. We're not gonna move or do anything until we're all on the same page, right? Because I think we're trying to coordinate a few things at the same time. The road, whatever the drive up thing is that you're gonna do over there. Drainage.
Right,
I mean, we
like
wanna be
crust pull out,
efficient.
right, yeah.
So that's where we're at.
That's the magic word, the efficiency.
Yeah.
Trying to, make it work.
Right. The good news is I got word from the feds that on our ARPA funding, which is what we're gonna use first, right, for this project, we don't have to get any additional bids for anything 250 and below. So what we've been doing is we've been getting our engineers, and I don't know, there's a whole lot of them, mechanical, structural, I don't know. They've actually given me like 2 bids when it went over 250, so that I don't have to go through the whole bidding thing. Put it out first. It's all right, it was administrative fees, not work. Upfront about everything. So those are, because that's the way to do it. I mean, to be efficient, we need to be efficient. We only have a certain amount of money. And the costs just keep going up and up. So I hope that's helpful. I wish I had a good idea, but I don't. Probably have a better idea than I do. I start talking, my head starts spinning.
It's not only the high cost, it's even getting the materials you need to do the work. And that's not to mention the labor.
I think we've moved from having a steel frame to a,
Glue lambs or something?
yeah, because of, yeah. So I don't know what that is. I know what beams are. I do know what those are. Yeah, I just got a lesson on that the other day.
Yeah.
I do,
Nothing.
one time. We had talked one time and you said that there was a time frame you had to be, when you received your funding, where you had to be completed. 3 years.
So this is the way it works for us. I'm sure it works that way for you guys in different scenarios and different grants. We get different grants. The COVID funding was this one-time funding that everyone's talking about, right? And it was very specific. What you could do with it, you only had so much time to spend that money. The longest period of time we had to spend some money was 2 years, and that was the very last one we got. The capital improvement grant is 3 years. I can do an extension once. I've actually extended the 250 loan or 350 loan. Our grant I ended up getting back way back when we first started this whole thing. I actually extended it for like 3 more years, and then that was like, can't do it anymore. So I had to, surrender the money. But I'm sure I can get at least 1 more year. But we don't have any, literally, we have no room. I mean, we can't see any more people, and just the complaints coming in now are overwhelming us. I mean, they're just, how can we fundraise when we're gonna have everyone complaining? So it's a hard. I'm not.
And Chair, if I can, just to add something to kind of the broader conversation around drainage improvements, I think what will be important is to identify final design and alignment for the extension of Washington Street. Hopefully we can design that connection to the Citrus Fair Drive, identify the planned use and design layout for the property to the west, adjacent to Washington School, so that we can, as part of that, make sure that the drainage alignment for underground utilities, are consistent with and coordinate with those planned improvements. So I think there's a real opportunity at this time to be able to do some of that foundational work around, identifying what's the design for that area adjacent to the gymnasium. What size, where do we want to put? I mean, we kind of did some of that conceptual work, but to actually, start to lay out something that could be used for construction. So I feel like there's, again, what we did to date was identify the conceptual layout, but it's more now starting to move that forward into a construction design, and how is that going to lay out with the proposed improvements, in that western that western property area adjacent to the gymnasium.
We gotta get the time together.
I think Relji and Ray and all of the company are working on that now
Okay.
with Matt's oversight, I guess. They've been talking about that stuff, so I know they're working on that layout and something to propose to the city, so.
I just wanted to just throw out, I know we talked in the past regarding the school doing a lot of work along the gym and all that corridor. We didn't want to see, have to go back and redo something, put it in curb gutters, sidewalks, and to make sure that if there's anything that needs to be extended to tie in, it's identified before that work's done. And I think, Preston, you mentioned that that's wrapping up.
We have a very short time
And I think that's
to expend our
important,
funds.
to finish that job, and if there's things that have to be extended, it really needs to be identified sooner than later, so that could be built into the plan. Otherwise, if you see it, you know, in 2 years, come back and start tearing things apart to run it, doesn't make good economic sense. So,
No, I mean, because of our bond funding structure, we need to spend it, and we also have construction management support right now. So from the standpoint of our side of the project, we have been trying to come up with a design that would be acceptable to, you know, DSA, et cetera, because of the school, it adds another layer. It seems to me like the group needs to get together to, like, I don't know. It feels a little bit like a quilt, for lack of a better analogy. You know, like we each have pieces of this and they all come together. And, you know, as you were saying, we want all of these things to fit together correctly. So how can we do that?
I was hoping the engineers could kind of look at the project
Yeah.
and figure out, you know, and I know you're under the timeline, and so I think your piece is critical to have stubbed out, different things that need to be stubbed out.
I mean, we kind of have our alignment,
Yeah,
but we need to be fully coordinated with the city and the health center's engineers for elevations and confirmation that those alignments work for you guys as well. But Kurt Kelder's on it, but we need to get that coordination happening fast and completed with the cities and the health center's civil engineers.
so, and that's been
And
raised, right?
final numbers, Shelley and Ray.
And there's this issue of the land trade, so to speak. Because we can't really move forward with our part unless that gets addressed, so it would be good for our engineers to put it together. Yeah,
And what about the citrus fair giving easement to? Where we at with that?
I think that we should proceed with that. Not, I don't see.
well, that I received, Citrus Fair reached out and said, we wanna meet, we're ready to meet. I think that I don't, you know, I'm new to this, so, and I'm new to the different interest groups, but my sense is that they see the benefit, they're ready to talk about it. They object to having it done without their participation, even if they're not directly involved. So I'd need some direction about, you know, because it's not on their property, correct? Am I missing something? Help me out.
It's not on
Here.
there.
No, it's not on
Yeah.
The part we're talking.
Right. They also reached out to me and I recommended that the four entities get together.
Okay.
And
They reached out to me, so.
Okay,
So, they said as soon as the fair was over, the week, or that meeting.
so I just got an email from Allison last week about it, and the date they picked, I can't do. So we're looking, finding a date right now, I'll be honest, with the school year and the lack of staffing. I am so slammed, but I will make it work, and the best time is like 6 at night. Sorry.
I was thinking between midnight and 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I'm busy at that. It is
Right.
Yeah, 3:30 this morning.
So what I can also reach out to Carl, Billstaff,
Okay.
and their board on their board.
Okay.
And just say, when is your meeting? Maybe they have one scheduled.
Right.
We can all go
We
to
should just-
theirs.
yeah.
And just kind of show good faith. Like, let's go.
No, need an easement or something to connect the public road to a private road?
It's preferable.
It is, yeah, I think to Preston's point, it's ideal to at least get their support. It's kind of unprecedented in a way to have a public road and a private road that serves a public purpose. So it's an odd situation, and there's no clear legal guidance that we can look to other than, other laws that provide for prescriptive easements and things like that say we can do that. But it's an area where we've been trying to collaborate and seek some common ground on why it makes sense and all parties can benefit. But it's been, as you know, Debbie,
Yeah.
you've been in the meetings, it's been challenging.
But she did reach out, so
Yeah.
I mean, she reached out to.
We have to keep the doors open.
Yeah,
Everyone there was positive and good intentions.
Despite that, the reason I'm a little skeptical is the email goes back a few months, I don't know by memory, but they mentioned about all the parking places they were losing. And that they 80 parking places.
really.
Exactly.
They don't,
I couldn't count that. I don't know how they came up with that number. But it's just like, they were very open if we could kind of provide parking. I didn't know where that came from. Do you remember?
I don't remember the exact number, but I think they were alluding to that they've had opportunities to use the parking on the school during the event during Citrus Fair.
Boosters runs that, right?
So, yeah, Boosters does run it. They were parking up to 200 cars at a time. Someone from the fair board actually said that we were stupid by putting a gym there because now they lose the parking spots. And I just had to keep quiet. I won't mention names. I won't anything to move forward from comments like that. I think that what they're seeing now is that can still happen. It happened great for their fair. But I think they're also seeing that there was a lot of people parked in that parking lot, or that open area, hundreds. I mean, I'll bet you had a total of 1,000 throughout the weekend. So there's a lot of gain and positive reason for them to be working with us
Right.
in each part versus against. And I think they also saw in that same letter, they were talking about closing, they want to close their streets and it's been extended, they can't. They want to make it one way, and I said, well, that doesn't negotiate on for the future. There's lots of things that they think that they can do that they can't.
Well, we had a lot of conversations with them. Different CEO, it was a different board, so it would be good, I think, to have another, who would like to take the challenge of coordinating the meeting, the engineers, and get everybody on board.
Well, I think my sense is there's two things, because I don't know. People who know more about construction can weigh in. I feel like the engineers need to just meet and talk it through. I don't think we all have to be there. I think it's the meeting where we have a kind of a handshake around, like, we're gonna do this together. And what are your concerns? That I feel like, am I right?
I think both the district and the city and the health center need to tell their engineers
Yeah.
tonight, we expect these deliverables on this date.
Okay.
And they need to get together and do it, because we don't have any input for that.
They basically start out.
And they have
Yeah.
tons of it. They just,
Airlines should be,
I do that,
Because
you
you're on-
can email me your engineers emails.
it's Kurt Hilder, right?
Kelder,
I mean, I don't think there's anyone.
I probably have both.
you have
but just in
Rosie,
case I don't.
I'll email you Rosie, Race, and Oliver, and Matt, so they all can go.
Then I'll put it in an email, I'll CC everyone in this room on it.
And who's ours? Bill?
And Chuck.
Rosie and Race, yeah, it's kind of convenient, because they know.
And then with that is June 1. Okay, because I know that
it's way
Kurt
too
Keller
late.
2 weeks ago was supposed to have a final. So
That's why when we say
He's been
this is
working
the
with
date
Rosie
for your
Grace.
deliverables,
it should be possible. I don't see why June 1 could not happen.
that's more than long enough.
I agree. Thank you. So everybody, if I throw that date out there, you're okay.
So you're gonna take the lead on this?
I will take the
Okay.
lead on that. We need that by that date to push this forward.
Mayor and chair and school trustees. The other issue that, and Alex did touch on it, but I think he was gonna have a conversation with the district council as well about the potential transfer and how
Property line.
address the legal requirements around how to, one, do the lot line adjustment and the improvements in addressing that the property was purchased by the housing successor agency. So I think there is a plan, and I could certainly emphasize that, that we're working under some timelines to get this done. But
So
I just want to
does
mention that.
legal, both of our legals need to get together and
Right.
have deliverables for us on that topic.
Exactly, be able to, well, and I think part of it is coming up with that final design, so they have something to look at that says,
So
here's.
that piece
Well,
for
so
that
you
right,
piece.
yeah.
cost, right? Because, we need to get cost for what property we're giving up or whatever, and you need to have the cost as to what you're putting into the city street, so that we can know where we're at. So with this, I'm going to ask for, would Kelvin come up with that on his cost, or is that? He is.
He might be able to do an engineering. Oh, yeah, he can do the engineering estimate for the cost of improvements. Absolutely. We just need to ask him for an engineer's estimate for cost of improvements. And Rogelli and Race can check his work so that you have it from both sides of the table.
And ultimately, we have our development review engineer, so we'll need to look at that, just make sure it comports with city standards.
Is
There's no reason to
the
feel it was.
sliver along Washington Street part of this? Or are we just looking at where the extension of Washington would be?
I mean, like for the school giving
There's-
that part of the city?
Yeah, is that part of this?
I don't know, I know that's been in the talk, but I didn't think it was part of this conversation unless you guys wanted to be, because that's you giving.
It's
What do you guys?
Well,
probably immaterial to me, but it seems like it would clean up our side of the street and set the path to where we want the other side of the street to move forward to.
Yeah, there was an exhibit drawn up that shows a small section of right of way. It's largely, think of it as it's a curb, gutter pan, and a part of the sidewalk where there's existing right of way. Well, it's not existing right of way. It's looks like right of way. It's owned by the school district. That if you're to kind of keep a clean line, that area would be an area that could be dedicated to the city. So that's just part of the public right of way. But I can send those exhibits. I think when I Beth's predecessor, I sent it and he said, okay, looks good. But, we were kind of, where do we want to go with the whole conversation? And we never really resolved that. So we can revisit.
And so
that.
if that's gonna bog down what we've got to do now, which is the extension area, we can bifurcate it. But if it's not gonna bog down, it would seem more efficient financially to just do it all at once.
How would I word it like that? The school sounds very willing to do that, but we want the lot line adjustment for both to follow the curb line. If it is going to bog down the process, then we'll have to get it separate so that the new portion is separate from that, and that can happen at later. I'll word it.
And the one thing that needs clarity, I think, is because the curb line goes in where the turnout will be, our proposed turnout, so does it follow the curve of the road? That's, I don't know what the standard is.
So
Where the
bus turnout would be on
city's
your property, right?
property
Yeah,
The
goes.
bus turnout would be on your property, is how I was.
Well, that was
That's-
kind of a question I had,
I
because
just don't know.
the way I think it was presented was that the bus turnout itself would be on the city side, so to speak. And kind of question came to mind is that do you want that to be in the public right of way, or does the school district really want to retain ownership and control, if you will, of that bus turnout or that drop off zone, however you want to characterize it? It's kind of designed as a bus turnout. I thought my initial inclination, you typically see that as being part of the school property, but again, it's what's the desire? How do you want to use it?
I mean, I'm speaking for me, but I think it's just fine for it to be part of the school property, but I don't know what the standards are. What is a normal city standard by a turnout like that? Does it stay out at the edge of the road, or does it encompass a turnout? I don't know.
Well, because they're traditionally done for public buses, so they're done as public right of way. But again, we're talking about school use, and so the school, you may want to keep that private, right? So that it's
Probably
part
better,
of the school
yeah.
I
property.
think
but
it's,
I don't
there
know.
are safety, like all
And
kinds of safety standards,
Dictated
CSA,
by DSA, yeah.
ADA, all of that it should be on the, personally, my gut is, and we can
So-
check with our attorney, that it should be on the school side.
For our state approvals, it's probably
Yeah.
better to be on
I
school.
think
side.
so,
Okay.
because it's different from like a regular bus.
Right, right.
Or regular
And,
driveway.
and that was my thought, just from the perspective of, if I was in your shoes, yeah, I don't want to manage that space and be able to dictate how it's used. And I think if you own it, it gives you that authority to do
Yeah,
that.
To do it.
It sounds like we're on the
Right.
same
Yeah.
page there.
Yeah.
Right.
But, the property line should just be then, the proposed property line should, that bus should be on the school district side.
And so your gutter is basically the gutter lines of the side is your problem.
But I think, it's still treat those as public improvements, because you'd have a sidewalk that would be connecting rather than you're bifurcating
Rather than falling
the
gutter.
travel path,
Yeah.
along the outside of that, the outside of that.
It's a good dialogue. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking that on. We don't want to make it too complicated. We really want to get some results, hopefully on this most pressing, which of course, during the retirement. So really appreciate that. And you'll copy everybody.
Absolutely.
Anything else on this one? We'll move along.
Chiefly on that one.
Okay, we'll move on to 5D, identify and discuss traffic safety issues for safe routes to school.
Chair, I think this was an item, and excuse me, Superintendent, that you kind of wanted as a discussion item to kind of talk about how the school and the city can collaborate on just addressing safe routes for our school children to be able to walk to school or bicycle to school. Of course, these improvements that we're talking about on Washington Street is kind of a critical aspect of that, but just to seek opportunities where we can work together to identify where there might be some deficiencies. So I think that's, Chair, I think that was why that was here. It's just kind of a standing item more than anything, but.
I think it's definitely a shared interest, because we know as developments go in, they don't necessarily address sidewalk, lighting, crosswalk,
Right.
so on and so forth. So I'm not sure if we have anything to say on the subject. I certainly don't have anything other than that I think it's a shared interest, and we've got to anticipate how kids are going to be getting to school, and then try to make sure that that infrastructure is getting put in place.
Well, I think it's even deeper than that. I think we need to come up with a list of areas that are of concern, and Ashley Road is one of the big ones right now. So high on our list. It's a lot of work. It's very unsafe for children to be riding bikes or walking to school, with no lighting, they come back in the dark. I think it's really incumbent on us to try to identify areas of concern. And we do have, Safe Route to School grant funding that it's not going to be enough to. That's how we took care of the west side of Cloverdale Boulevard going up towards the shopping center. It took 3 or 4 years to get enough funding in there to just do the repairs that we put in. But I think if we come up with a list, we really should look for other funding as well that's focused on infrastructure. And I know the city, we actually budgeted this year monies to bring a grant writer into the conversation to help go after some of these grant funding. So, but to do that, you're going to have the problem well laid out and the need identified. So, I mean, though I didn't ask for this to be on there, Ashley Road is a big one, and there's probably others. So my suggestion would be if we can compile a list of areas of concern that need some attention, we can try to develop that and find the money through various infrastructure grants that are out there to start working towards fixing some of those things.
I think we could do that most effectively, identifying those areas.
Well, I think, if you're aware through parents, different conversations with teachers, us knowing through our officers patrol the city. We're aware of, I know, one big one. We've voiced that over and over. That's the Asti Road project. We just need to come up with a list of areas that we would like to look at finding funding to improve.
The area in front of they're putting in an apartment complex is a Cherry Creek. It's just between, it's past the Boys and Girls Club. That area, one side of it is missing sidewalk, correct?
That's correct.
And so you'd have to cross over to the west side to walk on a sidewalk, right?
Yes.
I think that's an area that's on my radar.
So that's the type of things we need to identify.
Any new development, I think like that Baumgartner area, we should look to see if those routes are set up, and then the development north of town as well. There's not good sidewalks and passage up to there.
Or bike
Up on the
path,
hill.
Yeah.
So if we can just, maybe at this meeting, maybe at our next meeting, if you're aware, just bring a list, we can compile it. And we'll take it from there and see what our options are for funding that might be available.
Can we make that an agenda item for our next meeting, our next regular meeting?
Next week.
Yeah, because we may have a special meeting just for the agreement. Does anyone know, I don't think I've seen the phase development for Baumgartner Ranch, if there are, integrated like greenbelt bike paths, anything like that in that development that connect to other areas or roads?
Yeah, the kind of the main backbone street is Foothill Drive. So it's think of it as an extension of Foothill Drive. So that extension has,
Same street section, so the sidewalks, the bike path, so that will bring people into town that way.
Okay.
but some of the facilities otherwise are since a portion of the project's multifamily, it's more integrated and just in terms of the on-site trails or paths and bike parking, but not necessarily, it's private. It's not necessarily connected specifically to public infrastructure. But I think for those residents, there's going to be that connection to the city's infrastructure right of way that they will provide, a clear path for those residents. But I think, as something you see with new development is sometimes there's new ways that residents think about how they're going to go to school that you don't realize until they're there. I think we've tried to be forward thinking and identify those areas where sidewalks are needed, but
I think maybe too, I'll put it on the list, but when you come down Foothill, you get to Cherry Creek Road and the right, when you're going east, the right side has sidewalk and the
Or the left side of the
Left side does
sidewalk and the
not.
right is
in
not.
fact, I saw a little kid, I don't even know why he was allowed to ride a bike out there, but he was riding a bike on that road on the no sidewalk side. Yeah, north side, yeah, oh, I was like, oh my God, I was like, it's not that safe. But that might be something right when you get right there,
Yeah,
and because otherwise.
well,
we're
that
gonna-
intersection is kind of funky.
Funky anyways,
today, so
yeah. But it is wide enough and it does have bike lane all the way down to the dead end.
Well, something we can think about. I've had experience with the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, and we can do kind of a walking audit with them. Maybe we, when time permits, identify a group of parents that might be interested in maybe walking, say, to the middle school, and then doing that, identify where are there some gaps that exist, where are some of the safety concerns for the parents or their kids in terms of, riding their bike, being able to cross the street. And it's kind of fun in a way, in the sense, you can kind of actually walk the areas and see what they're talking about. And it also covers folks with disabilities and, identifying where there's some need for ADA improvements and things like that. So, and the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition seems pretty progressive and interested in doing that kind of planning work. So that might be an opportunity for us to work with them to identify,
I like that idea.
doing the walking on it. Pick a nice morning, have some coffee and
Yeah,
get some
I
exercise.
like it.
There are two things. One is check, or maybe Kevin, with the Safe Route to School funding cycle. And is there an application process? I don't know if we have to submit something for that to get on that list, or if there's a certain allocation each year. But I know in prior years, we
Yeah.
built up monies to make some improvements, so it'd be helpful to know that process. And the second thing is, I know you and staff are looking at the Aston Road safe route to school kind of in the town process, and maybe if we could have something on that in our next meeting, we'd be able
Okay.
to take a look at that, because that's a big piece right here. That's a real big piece.
It's just a grant at the county level or no, at the USDA for open space, which that probably would qualify for.
I've got the information. But it was, everybody in the state's going to do the same.
Everybody else says they are.
That's why you have to be shovel ready, so to
Yeah.
speak, putting the list together, having the justification, and then being on time.
That's why you do grant writing,
Yes.
because we don't have enough time to be shovel ready for every grant.
Sure.
Well,
But it's really having the problem well articulated, laid out, what needs to happen, and what it's gonna cost. That's shovel ready. When the money's available, then you can submit everything, not go after and try to figure it out.
And Chair, there's two sets of safe routes to school funding. There's the state program and there's the federal program. I would highly recommend we focus on the state program because we can lobby our assemblymen and senators. And that funding usually has a lot less strings than the federal funding. And it's very challenging dealing with the Federal Highway Administration. I mean, would not say we wouldn't look at that. I think the state funding is where we're gonna have much more success.
And I think we may stand a better chance because of the way this whole thing went down with the state mandate on the housing. So I've already talked to our senator, talked to our senator yet, and the mayor's talked to him as well. And kind of laid the foundation. We're gonna need help getting some money. So I think, and he's all for it. So we get our plan together, then we can start that lobbying and figure out where we can get hopefully some help to get the funding to make that area safe.
And as you mentioned, Chair, the council did support putting our allocating funding in the budget to start the planning effort for Hosty Road. So our plan would be, assuming council approves the budget, would be to initiate design work for plan improvements to Hosty. So it would be a great opportunity for the district to participate in that planning process. I'm kind of excited about it because I think it's an opportunity to do something innovative with a road where it's pretty bland right now, but also really address that necessary pedestrian improvements for the Alexander Valley Apartment project. Assuming it moves forward, will be critical.
I wonder if there's anything we can do to slow traffic down.
Well, I think there is. I think there's a lot we can do.
Get them to stop at stop signs.
There are kind of, Kevin and I have been talking about this. It kind of falls under the heading of what's called complete streets. And they have a whole set of prescriptive types of improvements that you can do to help slow traffic down. They're all meant to kind of change behavior by narrowing the road, adding elements to it.
Traffic circles?
Traffic circles is one of them.
Their way.
Everyone just learn how to use them correctly.
Yeah, that would be nice.
But
right?
stop signs is another one.
Yeah, Giant speed bumps, I was like 12 feet apart. I'm thinking, holy crap, and I go down the road all the time. I'm just.
It's sensitive.
Slow down.
Time, all right. Let's go to item 5E if we could, and just a real brief update on you were going to check on.
I haven't done anything on this, you guys. I have to be honest. I'm doing about 5 jobs right now. So my apologies, but I haven't done research on the
We could talk
liability.
more at our ad hoc because it's regarding crossing guard, just wanted to just feel if that's possibly a possibility or not. And if it's not,
I think what I have to do is bring the high school staff into the conversation, and figure out scheduling. The biggest issue is, I mean, there are some safety things that we would want to check on, but also scheduling so that it doesn't either, it is part of the school day, embedded in the school day, or it doesn't negatively impact scheduling. So it's just,
no, I get
Yeah.
it. So it's just one of those things we'll just move to.
yeah, my apologies. I just couldn't get to it yet. Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
anything else on crossing guards? We'll move on to the student lifeguard certification program. And again, I know that they reached out, they have the training this month in May. I know they reached out, I think, to the principal of the high school.
yes.
And any update?
I don't know. My sense was that there were a few students who were interested in doing the training. I'd have to go back through my emails, Joe, but I believe that we had at least 2 students who had signed up. And we got the information was, out early enough. We're having a hard time right now enlisting students in almost anything, even scholarship applications. So if we were able to enlist 2, I would feel pretty happy about it. Let me see if I can pull that up. So the idea, of not only training so that we have better lifeguard coverage, but also a summer employment opportunity for students. And Ronnie had really taken that on and tried to promote it. So
What was the cost of the certification?
It was minimal, but
Yeah.
but if they couldn't afford it, it was grants available. So it wasn't, money should not have been. Did you say 25?
I thought it was,
Yeah, I thought it was like 70 or something.
75, pretty sure that's
But-
what cover
But it even said,
No,
it said if
I
they can,
yeah.
but if they weren't, it said right in there, because we questioned them on that, they said no, then they put it right in the front. If you're not, if that was a problem, there's grant funding available, so that was clear. Okay, we can get it up there, I just wanted to. just
I can
share
send
with you.
something to the group with numbers and whether or not,
Just to
we
see
were
how
able
we're
to.
moving it,
Yeah.
because that's a critical piece as the pool opens up later this month to have adequate lifeguards.
So we may be going to block scheduling as kind of a beta test. We're not committing to it ongoing, but one of the things that would allow us to do is to actually use the pool for PE. With the traditional schedule, we wouldn't be able to do that. There's not enough time to get the kids there, changed, et cetera, et cetera. But that is a huge win. In my opinion, we should be teaching everyone how to swim. So assuming that schedule moves forward next year, that's a hope that we can integrate it into the curriculum.
Anything else on that? Okay, we'll move over to the standing items. We don't need just a quick update on the pool, and I have that here, and the pool's ready to go. Really, they're doing all the different checks. They ordered new ADA compliant furniture, which has been installed. They have the new picnic tables and pump equipment's all installed. And as the city manager pointed out, we're getting ready to do a little ceremony. The county is gonna come up and do a little ceremony. We'll be there. I'm hoping the school district will be there because they're partners in this whole collaboration as we move forward. So if we can maybe get them, I'm not sure if somebody from the district or president of the board may want to say a few words as well, talking about the curriculum and how it's going to benefit the school hopefully in the future.
I'm sorry, do we have a date? I want to.
Yeah, Chair,
I have it.
Superintendent, I just sent out a flyer
1 o'clock.
for that
May 7th.
was sent by, the county's planning the Cloverdale pool celebration. They notified us late Friday afternoon that they've set a date. I just emailed the flyer for that event. They did ask if there was anybody who'd like to speak. So if there's someone from the school district, Kristen or superintendent, if you'd like to be on the agenda as a speaker.
Just to suggest, because Preston was instrumental from the very days, just like I was. Actually, it was him and I that were approached by the community on this whole thing. And it started out with the heating
We had a
into
little
a major
ad hoc committee,
revamp.
yeah.
So I think he would be, if
I have no need to speak because I'm a latecomer, so I would love for someone who has
he's got the
background.
history of the whole
Yeah.
thing, so it would be good if the
Good with
person.
that.
if
I
you're-
know.
It looks all right, yeah.
Not roof, it's solar.
So,
Yeah, so it'll be a little bit of long season, that's for sure.
And Chair, if I can,
And
just,
warmer.
so every year the city executes an agreement with the YMCA to operate the pool, usually traditionally from Memorial Day to Veterans Day. I think this year, kind of like we did last year, is try to seek opportunities to extend the pool period a little bit later into, I guess that would be September. While it's still warm and hopefully the pool is plenty warm given the solar heating. And then we fund that through a generous, usually a very generous contribution from the Sink Foundation that helps offset the cost of that funding agreement with the Y. But we pay the Y to provide the programming, and they do usually offer some free swim days to low-income members of our community and swim training as well. And so we're in the works of getting that agreement executed, which we provide for. And I'm also coordinating with, we've already had a request to do end of the year swim activity this year. So I'm trying to coordinate that with the Y, and I provided the county the
Talking about our 8th grade trip,
Yes,
day away.
well, there's two.
Oh my
There's
God.
there's a day away, and there
Gives me
was
hives thinking about it.
there's a PE teacher that wants to do a 2-day kind of basic swim class.
Yes.
So I forwarded that request to Sonoma County because we have a what'd you call it, Joe? A MOU, right, with the county that kind of sets forth how we can use the pools. It's not ours, but just making sure how we, reflecting this relationship with the funding agreement, which said that it's going to be able to be utilized by the school. And so I'm not sure how that's going to comport with the MOU or whether we need to make any changes, but hopefully we'll work through any kinks and we can. But Superintendent, if you have any concerns about 8th grade day, let me know.
Oh my gosh, I just, kids and swimming pools and chaos, it's, I think it's awesome, actually. It's just, all my worst case scenarios get going.
Well, I think the benefit is that they do charge, but they provide lifeguards
Yes.
and oversight. So, that could alleviate having a teacher do it, I would think, but that's clearly, I understand
It's
the
a
risk.
high ratio of lifeguards to students. It's good. Yeah. So
It's important.
I think it's amazing and visionary that our district still allows for swimming activities. Frankly, I've worked in a lot of districts that just said you can't be anywhere near water. So it's you have to teach people how to be safe. So
Well, like we know, we've had a lot of accidents with our students over the past decade, including 2 years ago. So it's a good thing. That is part of the state curriculum. I think it's amazing to find it back.
And it's a socioeconomic, you can call it equity issue. Because our Latino students across the state tend to have the highest drowning rates because it's not a traditional thing to learn how to swim. So we have an opportunity now to give kids those skills, which may save life.
Yeah, especially with the river area that
Yep.
we're on. It's just, yeah.
you have to pass the swim test as a graduation requirement in San Francisco.
We used to have a swimming pool.
Yeah.
I had to take swimming, so I had no choice. So we had to walk tough distance. I had to walk from 21st and Harrison all the way down to Army Street.
Yeah.
And we walked as a class, not in formation. Walking down, go in there, swim, do all that, but walk all the way back. They didn't have buses.
Got your warm up and your warm down.
So just,
We need more of those activities for our kids to like wear them out. That would be great. Walk them all over the place.
Okay, so moving on from there, we'll move on to item 6B, update on the Times Square. We already talked really about
Right.
that, so we can move past that unless there's any questions from anybody. Okay. Item 6C, update on school facility improvements. Anything that you want to share?
Well, I mean, we're continuing to do improvements this summer. There's nothing as monumental as what we've already done. But we are making improvements to classrooms at Jefferson. We are doing some additional roofing. It's not as glamorous, but and then we're trying to conserve a portion of our remaining funds for this road, continuing opening the street. But there aren't, I think the bulk of our sort of, I don't know, visible improvements, the things you really see from the curb are done.
We're
They
also
look
working
really
on
nice.
all the planning parts so that the south property could potentially have fields put up.
We are, yeah, that's been interesting. Thank you, Preston, for me, Preston's been doing some extra work with was it with Fish and Wildlife or was it with?
Biologist.
Yeah. Because it's a complicated property. The other, and right now, we're also in the stages of trying to apply for funding to put in transitional kindergarten classrooms and more, sort of age and developmentally appropriate facilities. So we would be replacing the existing portables with facilities that are made for, that age group. But that's more of a long-term plan. And we're pursuing some other kinds of funding as a hardship district that will help us continue to improve, facilities. One of the things that I'm hoping to go on a tour tomorrow of a facility that has been somewhat unused, which is the alternative ed classroom for younger kids. Because we're looking at all of our spaces, trying to figure out where it would make sense to put an early learning, complex, where to move the MOT department if we were to put other classrooms in. So we're doing a lot of future planning, and then, trying to make the most of the facilities that we have. But the glamorous stuff, I'd say a lot of that is done.
Do we still have Head Start here?
We have the 4Cs preschool that is right near Joanna Eccles.
And the Head Start, there is a Sonoma County Head Start in the front building. Also.
Thank you for that. Any questions? We will move on to item BD, update on proposed housing projects in the future.
Yeah, we have not received any new residential applications. We're gonna honor our commitment to let you guys know as early in the process as we can when we get them. We really haven't received anything new. So we're just kind of working through some of the older ones and are pretty much all approved at this point, you guys are aware of. So we'll let you know if any new ones come in.
Thank you for that. And, in the language of the MOU proposed, there's some changes.
Yes.
on that.
I'm curious, this is just for my own interest. I saw on the planning commission, there's a development going in over in this area. Single family homes.
Yes.
Just a view.
Do you know when they're breaking ground?
That one has been around for many
Yeah.
years. It's kind of complicated. I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's already semi-approved. The subdivision map's been approved. Now they're just looking at the design of the homes, and it will be
Okay.
before the city council on June, is it 8th or 9th? If just between these four walls, I don't know if that project will ever get built. There's a
Okay.
lot of really expensive infrastructure pieces that have to go in prior to them even breaking ground. So it is, at best, a few years out. There's slide mitigation they have to do, put a road in, sewer, water. So I just don't know if it'll ever happen, but they are still pursuing it. But it's a couple of years out before any.
As with all of these things, they get in the system and they're there, and it's sort of, you just don't know when it's gonna actually happen. So when they break ground, then that is for us where we have to start really anticipating how we're gonna serve the kids. But like you're saying, it could be years before it happens, so,
Well, and then on top of that, those are higher end.
yeah, so
homes,
you may not have as many kids.
It will be more of a
Yeah.
secondary home So
We did an assessment, it's like 9 kids for us. It's not, that type of home doesn't generate a lot of enrollment.
however, the construction entrance has to put in on Foothill for Fun Partner.
Okay,
Things are going on, whether they're encroached permits or anything you're in, I don't know, but.
whether they've paid their
There's
developer's
some
fees or
dirt that
not,
has been
they have.
moved.
They did, they paid, okay, okay.
Just saying that it took a step forward in the past week
Okay.
that people are calling me about, so, you know, we're being notified real quick. Sorry.
Anything else on that? We'll move on. Any announcements? Any future agenda items, anything that we don't have on the agenda, that's something you want to add for our next meeting?
Just that item, we just talked about the safe routes to school assessment, starting to put together our survey of trouble spots.
Yeah, and that was, Michael, that will stay on the agenda.
Should we make it a special item for the discussion with the spare? Or should we just leave that as one of our current items for discussion along with the?
I'm thinking the engineers are gonna talk and we should be getting something back. So I think we would just have it on
Use
the
that
agenda.
as part of the drain project, just leave it as that item.
Because that's a big piece of this item. Yeah, so that is stay on. Yeah. Any other future? Okay, move on. Any items? Anything for the good of the order?
Chair, but good of the order.
Yeah.
So our student liaison, Guadalupe,
Oh,
is
Fantastic.
kind of wrapping up her role as the school year ends. So on the 25th, we do have a certificate of appreciation for her service as a member of our city council. That's going to be on the agenda.
What's your regular?
Yes.
Is that also when you're going to be talking about the budget, David?
Yes.
And it's a good time to bring up, maybe, we typically used to have 2 student liaisons, one for the first meeting of the month and the one for the second meeting of the month. We were not able to get to do this particular year. It's good to give the students an opportunity to get engaged in that. It's a good process. So I'm not sure how we're going to start the recruitment for the next semester. But we need to start thinking about getting that word out. We ran into, I know you ran into some problems. So I'd like to see maybe if there's something you can kind of put together at the school level to kind of encourage that. As we start the,
Well, we are, I will say, we're ahead of our game with our student board representative. We actually have someone identified, so for summer, which is really early, which means that we may be able to help you, generate, we may be able to help generate some interest. And I think we really have to promote it as community service.
yeah, well,
Since,
there's also a scholarship.
Yeah.
What is it, $700?
$750.
$750 per, so it's a pretty good scholarship. So that's exciting, and that's still through Roycer and the Kiwanis Club.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we should recognize them too.
Yes.
Again, those 2 clubs, we've done that in the past. It's very nice that they step up and make that happen.
Should we invite them to the meeting for the picture?
That'd be great.
I know we used to do that to the city.
To this, right.
And you could do it for the council meeting.
I have something for the good of the order. Tomorrow is senior portfolio night. I'm sorry, you're gonna be busy,
Don't worry, you're on the Wednesday one.
but we do invite the community to come and participate and hear the students present. So if anyone's interested in doing that, it's a pretty big event after years of not being able to do it. So it starts at 5:30. Snacks will be served. So come if you are interested.
Thank you. Anything else? Good with the order? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and adjourn. Our next meeting will be Monday, July 18th. I know that's summer, so I'm not sure if that's. But does that work for the school?
Does not work for me. That
Works
is-
for me.
Does, he'll be back. I don't work at that time. I plan to be far away because my birthday is the next day.
You don't use it.
I can Zoom, I've offered that, I usually don't, but, so I'm open to that, if you don't mind doing a hybrid like that, I'm fine with that. Yeah,
So we
I
can.
mean, I don't know what time zone I'll be in.
I'm not sure, we have some things with the engineer report, with the MOU. We may want to revisit and have one a little sooner than that date.
I think we do.
So if you could maybe look at your schedule, because I think we're all here, for the most part, and maybe.
I'm available, the easiest is up through the end of June, and then I'm out for part of July, and then I come back and it's, the start of the school year. So if we can maybe find a date in June, and I just looked at my calendar to find some dates for us to meet that I'll email to Chief Ferguson, you and Ashley, and see if we can spend some time on the MOU. Yeah.
So David, maybe we can come up with a date in June, towards the end of the month, for our next city schools subcommittee, and then the next one won't be till
I don't
September.
know for you necessarily. So Preston will be gone, but I know.
I leave
he and
June
I-
16th and I'm gone for 3 weeks.
We're not coordinating very well. Mhm.
We are, I'm gonna be on St.
You
John's
Zoom
Door.
also.
Me?
Are you gone the whole month?
Zoom is probably possible.
No, Are you
But what's
gone
the
the
time
whole month?
difference?
I go June 16th through early July,
What's the time difference?
8 hours.
So we just have to schedule it so maybe earlier in the day or.
I could get up
I have young
early.
kids, I can't afford to go anywhere, so.
The sun comes up at 2, so actually I'm potentially could be up
Might even be
2 a.m.
the first 3 days of July.
Does the sun actually set?
Where I am, it'll set, but only briefly.
Fourth, yeah, she'll be-
Are you here the first, July 1st?
I don't know. I'm working a lot outside of my calendar, so I'm trying to really protect July. And so I'm not gonna commit to anything.
Okay, well, we'll pick a date.
We will figure it out.
Figure it
Yeah.
out.
Let's see how the
Yeah.
situation goes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I